Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Teacher's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Brian Costello, here to talk with some incredible educators and hear the stories that have made them who they are today. Welcome back to the Teacher's Journey. I'm your host, Brian Costello, and I'm joined this evening by a fellow podcaster, someone who I've had the pleasure to be a guest on his show, and someone who I had the pleasure of knowing over the past year, just learning a lot from both his podcast and the things that he shares on social media. My guest tonight is Brent Coley, a principal in California, elementary principal, right? So you work with the younger guys, and Brent is the host of a podcast, the author of an upcoming book, and just he's got all kinds of great stories to share. In fact, his book coming up and is going to be called Stories in EDU, and we'll get to that later on, because what I really want to get to is Brent's story himself. So, Brent, thanks for joining me, and welcome.
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for the opportunity. Looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely. So, let's start. This is where I start every time, because we could start in the middle, but people will get confused. So let's start at the beginning here. How did you become a teacher? How did you become an educator? When did you know that this was going to be your thing?
My story is not the same as many teachers, where you hear people say like, "Oh, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I played school growing up," or that type of thing. My parents were educators, and that was not necessarily my story. I wanted to be a computer programmer growing up. My dad worked for a computer distributor when I was in elementary school. So I had a computer in my house, like one of those Zenith with an amber monitor, like smaller than the size of your iPad mini back then. Back when I was in like third grade, back at a time when very few people had computers, personal computers in the home. So I learned starting in fourth grade to program in BASIC. I was that kid. So I was that kid. So I want to be a computer programmer. Always thought like, well, teaching might be fun, but it was like back burner, maybe not even on the stove, because I was going to be a computer programmer. So when people ask, why'd you become a teacher? The short answer is because I couldn't do calculus. That's the short answer, because in college, I went to junior college to start, and I had to take 4 semesters of calculus before transferring to the major university. And I took the first semester and I got a D. I was like, oh, that's not good.
Well, and then I still need to take 4 semesters.
Exactly. So I took it over and I got a B. It's like, all right, sweet. And then I went to take the second semester and I got another D. And I remember thinking, now, in fairness, I probably wasn't putting the effort. Volleyball was pretty big in my life at that point, so I wasn't putting the effort I should have. That being said, I remember thinking at the tender age of like 18, 19, like, I don't have time to do everything twice. Like this is not. So I remember talking with my parents.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, talking with my parents and just came to the conclusion, like, you know what? I want to be a teacher. It's always something like just the career path shifted. And I remember it was one of the most freeing, liberating decisions I've ever made, and never looked back. And from that moment, I switched my major. I ended up getting a degree in child development, my multiple subject teaching credential, master's in curriculum and instruction, and ended up getting my admin credential. So my story was not like many teachers, because it was never not like, I would never be a teacher, but I was going to be a computer programmer.
Yeah,
so
you kind of had that thing in your head.
Yep.
Yeah, I did not want to be a teacher, and I was not going to be a teacher, and I didn't go to school to be a teacher, and I got my first job, and I wasn't a teacher, and I still wasn't a teacher. And then all of a sudden I was like, I hate this. I hate what I do, and I hate what I'm doing. And I don't really even like myself while I'm doing it. So I'm going to leave this and go wait tables. And then my wife said, hey, you should be a teacher. Like, you should work with kids, see if you like it, a long-term sub. And then that was it. Like, I was in.
Yep.
But yeah, so I know the thing, like, teaching wasn't your thing necessarily. And then all of a sudden college level calculus classes were not your thing.
It helped make the decision for me.
Yeah. That's what I wasn't a serious enough college student for most of my college career. And when it was time to go to graduate school and become a philosophy professor, that was just never going to happen. Like, my professors, after I, like, my final, like, thesis defense, were like, wow, that was amazing. Like, where's that been for 4 years? And they're like, we'll rewrite your recommendations. Do you want to, I'm like, no, I'm just going to move on. It's not happening. Yeah. And yeah, it's amazing how those, like, sometimes those moments just lead you in the right direction.
Exactly. It's been, like I said, best decision, one of the best decisions of my life. Never looked back, never regretted it. And then with the growth of educational technology, I've been able to incorporate that computer programming love, that technology love with teaching. So I got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that. You got into, you went to become a teacher. You said it was a very freeing feeling when you realized that I don't have to take calculus to be a teacher, and incredible advice. I don't have time to do everything twice. I think that's pretty far from true at 18, but you know what? That's okay. That's but also definitely not something I would discount. Like, I really don't feel like I have time to do everything twice.
I don't want to do everything twice.
I want to do it once and do it right the first time, but
yeah,
that doesn't always happen. So you go to school and you start working to become a teacher, you get your credential. Talk about becoming a teacher, that beginning when you first walked in the classroom, when you first became an educator, like actually the person who, the buck stops with you. This is your responsibility now.
I remember doing the student teaching. I'll go back to, I remember my first semester of student teaching. I student taught in a second grade bilingual classroom, Spanish speaking students. At the time, I spoke some pretty good Spanish, not perfectly fluent, but I probably did about 70% of my instruction in Spanish and the rest in English. It was nice. If I didn't know how to say something in Spanish, I'd say it in English, and they were learning English and I was learning. It was nice. And I remember at the end of that semester thinking, oh my gosh, look how far I've come. Look how much I've grown. Can't believe how green I was beginning that semester. Then fast forward to the end of the second semester, in my second semester of student teaching, where I student taught in a fourth grade classroom. And then I remember looking back thinking, I thought I'd come a long way in the first semester. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe how much I've grown then. And then I fast forward to getting my first job where it's a fourth grade teacher, and you get in there and just because there's no safety net, it's you're there, and I had a support provider who was alongside me and was just fabulous. At the same time, it was scary. It was scary, but it was awesome.
Good scary, yeah.
It was a good scary, and the kids and the parents were just fabulous. And I just remember, I mean, I was 25, I think, when I started teaching. So I was young, but I wasn't like young. So, and it was fourth graders. So it would have been, I think I would have been a lot more scared if I was teaching high school or something like that, but they were 9. So,
yeah, they were 9.
But 9-year-olds are scary when,
they can be,
but at the same time, the 9-year-olds don't realize that first year of teaching. I mean, your book, The Teacher's Journey. I mean, it's like oftentimes when you're starting teaching, you're just a couple steps ahead of the kids, and they don't necessarily know that, and that's okay. And then the second year, I'm a few more steps ahead, and you continue to get more and more comfortable with what you're doing. So
every once in a while, they sneak up behind you and whack you over the back of the head.
yeah, exactly. That's definitely going to happen, but But again, where I got hired, my first school was Sunset Lane in Fullerton, California. And I taught there for 6 years, and the people that I worked with were just, I mean, they were family.
Yeah.
I ended up moving, so had to leave that school and move to another district. But the people that I worked with, we still do an annual Christmas party. So nearly 20 years later, that's the type of people that I worked with. I remember the day that I found out that I was leaving, I went to my classroom and closed the door, sat at my desk, and cried my eyes out, because I wasn't just leaving the students, the school, I was leaving friends. It wasn't just colleagues.
The community,
Yep.
the family. Yeah, I understand that. I wholeheartedly understand that. Having made the decision to leave a small school where I worked for 8 years, where I got my first teaching job, and I moved to go to middle school for so many reasons that had nothing to do with the kids and the teachers and the families there, and it was like, even to this day, like, I still think back, like, I loved that place.
Yeah.
And I still talk to all the people that, like, I talk to people I worked with, and I talk to a lot of the families, and I see a lot of, like, I see the kids sometimes out, and I'll see, like, kids that I taught. I saw a kid that I taught 5 years ago yesterday. She plays softball down, like, and my daughter plays softball, and they're like, she's like 5 years older than my daughter, but still they play for the same rec league, like the same township league, because that family had moved, and they play in the same, but the same coaches in the same facilities. So I see her every spring, and it's like, oh my gosh, I taught you in kindergarten, you're in 6th grade now. And it's wild that, but the families that were there, being a part of that community, you're not just, I work in a school now where I definitely feel like I'm part of that community, but there's 1,000 kids in that school, and it's one of 2 middle schools where there are 1,000 kids in each of them, and a district where there's 10,000 kids in the district. And yeah, you feel like a part of the community in a different way.
Yeah.
But like, I knew every family, I knew every kid, I knew every story, I knew everybody, everybody's everything, and not in a bad way, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally get that. So let's jump into that moment there. So you left a school where it was just, it was a great fit.
Yeah.
And, we don't need to get into why you left there, but
I'll tell because people are like, geez, if it was so great, why did you leave? I had a commute that was crazy. I was leaving the house at about 5:15 every morning, and wasn't getting home till about 7 every night. And I had a little girl at the time. Still have she's not so little. She's 18 now.
She's a little girl. Doesn't matter.
She'll always be my little girl.
Your little girl, yeah.
But I wasn't seeing her grow up, and it was the type of thing that she was a baby.
Yeah.
And I did that commute for 3 years, and the fact that I did that for 3 years was a testament to the people that I worked with, and the culture and the quality of the school and the leadership in the school. But it got to a point where I had to make a change for my family. It was, and again, it was the absolute right decision. I shed tears because I was going to be leaving friends, but I was doing it for my family, which that should always be your motivation. And it was, and don't regret it for a second. And I ended up going to an equally amazing district, which I'm still in. So everything works out.
So let's tell me a little bit about that transition, though, because I know that I know personally that I was in a totally different role and in a totally different place, but just making it, and my school was dramatically different. I went from a school district of 150 kids to a school with 1,000, where I worked with more kids in a week than I taught in my entire career. Like, and so, but it took me probably like 6 to 8 months to adjust to where I was, to start figuring out who the people were that I wanted to, to build my myself around in that area and where I wanted to fit and how I fit into a school district there like that, which was different. So coming from that tight-knit community where you were, what was the transition like, and how did you make that work?
Well, fortunately, when I came in, the size of the school was very similar. Demographics was a little different, but not different yet the same in terms of very highly involved parent community in both schools. And my grade level team that I worked with was just fantastic. They made the transition very easy. That first year though was it was tough just because it was different, and things from school policies, like school-wide discipline policies, just how things are done weren't the same. So I was used to doing things a certain way, in a certain hierarchy, so to speak. And then when I moved, it wasn't that way anymore. So it was an adjustment. It took me a year. I mean, I remember by the time that second year rolled around, I'd found my groove. The teaching, like in the classroom, was the easy part. So it was more the peripheral things that were more of a challenge.
And so you moved to the school district. You said you're still there. So this has got to be a question that people ask you all the time. Why on earth did you become a principal? Because when I've told people in the past that I would like to be a principal, that is the question. Like, don't do it. They're like, nope, don't do it. Why would you want to do that? Don't do that to that's the kind of response I get from most people. Not everybody. And I don't think that's the kind of response I'll get from you, but I just wonder what motivation, so you made a really drastic change. Obviously you went from being in the classroom to moving to administration. Why do that?
It's a good question. And people have asked me that frequently. And I write about this in my book, and right in the introduction, it's like, if you would have said, when people used to ask me, oh, you're a teacher. Oh, you want to be a principal someday? My usual response was, are you crazy? Like, are you drunk? Like absolutely not. Like, many people get into education and they may have a plan, like, I'm going to teach for X number of years and then I'm going to move into admin by this point in my career. That was never, ever my mentality, my thought processes. I became a teacher because I wanted to be a teacher, and I was going to be a teacher, and I was going to retire a teacher because that's just what my plan was. And as my career progressed, the people that I worked under saw things in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. As I think so often happens, we see qualities in our students that they may not see in themselves, and our parents see stuff. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. We see stuff. It's very hard to see in yourself. Principals, administrators that I worked for kind of nudged me down that path. It still took a long time. And then the short of it really is, why did I become an administrator? I felt called. That is really the answer to that question, because while it's not something I was not running from, I know that sometimes you hear the stories where, I got to get out of the classroom, and people, and they're running, which I think is just, it makes my skin crawl, if I'm being honest, when I hear that, because it's like, ooh, you want to make the change for the right reason. I loved teaching. I still love teaching. It's actually, we're recording this on a Sunday night, and there's a Monday holiday, and on Tuesday I get to sub for one of our fourth grade classrooms, which I'm so excited about it. That at Christmas time we were giving away. I made like little. I got the idea from Ryan O'Donnell on Twitter. I don't know, Creative Ed Tech. If you follow him, he had like little lottery tickets, little template for lottery tickets, and you can buy little scratchers from Amazon. So we made a bunch of lottery tickets and passed them out to the staff, and they scratch them off, and they could win Starbucks cards. And one of the grand prizes was, I'll sub for you, like a free day off. Like, you don't have to use a sub day, and I'm going to sub for you. So I'm so looking forward to that. But I wasn't running from that. Just the opportunity came up. And the funny thing is, I used to swear there would be two things that I would never do. I'll never go to middle school, and I'll never become an administrator. And I did both of them at the same time. When I became an administrator, it was an assistant principal at a middle school. So never
That's
say never.
Right there.
For anyone listening, never say never, because you never know what's going to happen. But
as a middle school teacher, I look at the middle school vice principal and think to myself, that is probably on the totem pole of administrative jobs the most difficult and most thankless of tasks for an administrator to be.
It was challenging. It was, especially because I spent 15 years in the classroom at the elementary level, and then moved, and I ended up serving as an assistant principal for 2 years at the middle school level, and it was hard. But I tell you, as hard as it was, and as tired as I would come home at night, I would not trade that experience for anything, because the things that I faced, the experience that I gained during those 2 years was just invaluable. And then when I was able to become a principal back at the elementary level, nothing surprises me anymore.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Because perspective. I really gained perspective. So, and again, as hard as it was, in the midst of it, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. But looking back, if I had to do it again, I would.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm a better teacher. I'm a better administrator, hopefully a better leader, because of the situations that I had to deal with, both from discipline areas to staff challenges to parent issue, everything.
Yep.
So baptism by fire.
They all come to. That's. I was at one point I was applying for an assistant at middle school assistant principal position, and a friend of mine who'd been a principal for a while, he looked at me and goes, it all rolls downhill. And as an administrator, when you're the vice principal at a middle school, you're not just at the bottom of the hill. You're in the little latrine that they dug under the bottom of the hill, and you get to be the one holding the shovel as it rolls down the hill. Like, that's pretty much how the middle school assistant principal.
I had a parent say something, a very similar analogy to that. I won't get into the richness of it, but it all runs downhill. And why would you want to be at the end of that slide?
Right there at the bottom of the hill where it rolls. And, I do understand that, though. One of the reasons that I wanted to move to a middle school when I left the district I was at before was I wanted the experience, and also to a much larger district, was I wanted the experience of working with different aged kids and working in a different type of population. And one of the things that I found most challenging about this new place is it was easy to make an impact. It was easy to make a big impact in a small school. You want to make things happen, you go make them happen.
Yeah.
To make real impacts at a large school district like I'm at, is, especially from the middle, it's monumental. It takes a lot. And sometimes it's easy to get that kind of lost in the mix. It's much more difficult. It's a whole different process, and I learn a lot from it every day. So you got the chance to stop being a middle school assistant principal, taking all the valuable lessons you learned. And I say that not necessarily tongue in cheek at all, because you really do learn a lot from all those things.
Yep.
And all the things that you go through as an administrator in that setting. Back to elementary, what you become a principal, not something you had planned on, but
Nope.
you felt called to do it. So people saw something new. Talk about, what is it like? What is it like for you doing your job? Like, what do you see your job as an elementary principal? What do you think? Like, when you think about what is my actual job? Like, what do you think of? Like, what is your real responsibility? Because I've had at least 2 other administrators on, and I've got some really interesting answers from them about what they think their main responsibilities are as a principal. And as someone who's trying to figure out how to make that happen for themselves, I'm just curious to kind of compare those things.
That's such a great question, because I mean, it's like, at some point, I can't remember when, it was a few years ago, somebody said, like, you should write down like everything that you do in a day. And I mean, like, everything that you do in a day, and just because no day is the same. So I could sit here and list all the responsibilities of my job, but that's not answering your question. Really, I think what it boils down to, the word support. And really, it's like, my job is to eliminate obstacles for those that I serve, so that they can do their job to the best of their abilities. So if it's staff, I have an amazing staff, both the certificated and the classified staff, that just they're phenomenal. What they do for kids is amazing. My job is to eliminate or to remove obstacles, or to try to minimize as best I can the obstacles that stand in their way. If they need X to do their job better, and I'm able to give them fill in the blank, that's what I need to do. If it's supporting with discipline, working with kids, then that's what I need to do. From one of the things that I really, as I've sat in this seat for each year, the emphasis on culture, school culture is huge for me, and just helping develop that place that just feels good. One of the compliments that I have heard from visitors, whether it's district personnel or something, when they say, when we come on campus, it just feels good. And it's like, that just puts such a huge smile on my face, because you want kids to want to come to school. Toby Price, I don't know if you follow him on, he's a principal in Mississippi. He's got one of the best school taglines. It's like, where kids want to be and where teachers want to teach. And I just love that. And it's like, that really resonates, because it's like, we want it to be a place that is positive. Are academics important? Absolutely. Do we want kids to achieve to the best of them? Absolutely. But it has to be more than that. It has to be something where kids feel valued, where kids feel loved, where when they fall down, there's going to be someone to pick them up. If they're having a rough day, there's going to be someone there to talk with them. So back, summing all that up, to answer your question, my job is to support. My job is to remove obstacles. My job is to encourage. I'm huge in the power of appreciation. The studies that I've seen or read about, where it's like, they say 50%, and don't quote me on the numbers, but 50% of teachers leave the profession after 5 years because they get tired. They don't feel valued, and people.
I think that's actually low, that number.
Yeah, exactly. I think I read that years and years ago. But if people don't feel valued, they will leave. They will go somewhere to where they do feel valued. And the quote that I've seen, that people will always do more than is expected if they feel appreciated, or if they feel that the people that they are doing that for value what they're doing. So Not that it's all rainbows and unicorns and I mean, because that's a hard job, and there's stuff that you still have to have difficult conversations, and you can't say no to everybody. Excuse me,
Can't say yes to
you
everybody.
have to say
You could say
you
no to
can't
everybody,
say,
but
you could say no to everybody,
it
but
wouldn't be that great. No.
then that's not where teachers are going to want to teach, and not where students are going to want to be. But
Well, they just stop asking.
exactly. Yeah, you can't say yes to everybody, but just trying to find that balance of making it a place where there's just an atmosphere, a culture of appreciation and respect and just love. I mean, I know that sounds real cheesy, real corny, but we've worked hard on that. I mean, I came into a school that was already doing great. I mean, they were performing well. So the pressure that I had, don't screw it up, Brent, from an academic perspective, just don't mess this up. But one of the things that I've really tried to bring is just that positive culture, because if you can feel, I mean, I think you would agree with this. You can feel it. If there is a positive culture on a school campus, you can feel it. And if there's not, or if there's a negative school, you can feel that too.
You absolutely can.
You walk into the lounge,
and sometimes it's beyond your control. I understand, because I've had experience where it was beyond the control of the administration to fix the things that were going on there. Yeah. And it's sad that that was one of the reasons that it was beyond the control of the teachers. Like, I tried for years to try and fix it from the inside, and we made some really good progress, and that progress got thrown away by poor decision making on some people's parts. And it's just kind of one of those things where you're like, wow, it's amazing how different this place feels. Like, in my classroom, it felt the same way. Like, my classroom was a space unto itself, but walking around the halls, coming into work in the morning, talking to people in the lunchroom, it was just like, I like kind of people don't go in the lunchroom. I'm like, nah, that's where you got to be, because you got to interrupt those conversations that shouldn't be taking place. That's right. If you can't in the lunchroom, you can't intercept those conversations that don't need to be happening.
Yeah,
and as a teacher, like, as an administrator, you walk in the lunchroom, a lot of times those conversations are happening. It gets real quiet. But as a teacher, I can go in there, and when somebody's saying something that I don't agree with, I can be like, look, that kid's a good kid. Like, just because they act like that for you, or you see them do something like that in the hallway, like, you don't know them. You don't know what they're doing. I said, that kid's in my room, and in my room, this is who they are. I know who that kid is, because I've taught that kid for 2 years. Like, I know who they are. Don't come in here and say, so-and-so was doing this out in the hallway, or out on the playground, or so-and-so said this about somebody. Like, we're not playing that, because that's my kid. Those are my kids. So those are the conversations that you try to disrupt. But so I want to just come back to this point about culture, and how you wanted to really make a change. Like, really not, I don't want to say change, because you said things were good. But you wanted to build upon and really grow a culture, like you said, and you said, oh, it's kind of cheesy. And I think that if you had stopped at just saying culture, it might have been, but I think when you get to the point where you said, it feels right, it feels good, and it feels like a place where there's a lot of love. Talk about what can you do to promote that? I mean, because there's a lot of things that you hear and you talk about, but they don't necessarily actually accomplish that. So, like, I think I can high five every kid, and I can put nice notes up for people about how great they are. I can handwrite, I can call every kid's parents once a month, and I can send a note to the teacher, 2 teachers a day, every day of my life. All those things are awesome, but at some point there's something else to it. I feel like there's something else to it that makes it work. That I'm just kind of curious, what do you think makes that? Because for some people, they do those things and they fall flat. Whereas for other people, they do them and it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think if we're doing it just to check something off the list, it's going to fall flat. if it's something on our to-do list, I gotta write a Post-it note to say thank you to so and so. If we're looking at something I have to do rather than something that I need to do or I should do or I want to do, I think that's one of the big differences. I was talking with a friend, along the similar lines. I think trust is a big thing, where in terms of not micromanaging is something that I'm not a big believer in micromanaging. If we've got, again, it's my job is to remove those obstacles and to get those out of the way. And not say you need to be doing it exactly this way. I'm a big proponent of allowing and encouraging my teachers to take risks and to try things that are out of the box to increase student engagement and academic achievement. Again, and let me hit the pause button for a second. That's not to say that it's just, hey, do whatever you want. Because if what's going on isn't best for kids, well, then we need to have a conversation and we need to talk about that. But if I've got a teacher and again, I've got a staff full of them who are just dynamite at what they do, for me to come in and say, hey, do it differently, because that's not the way I would do it. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I just think, going back to your question, like why do some of those actions fall flat when done by some and others it doesn't fall flat? Number one, I think it is a process. It does take time. It's not something. When I got my admin credential, one of our professors, one of his words of wisdom that has just stuck with me is, you cannot change a culture until you become a part of it. And that really resonated with me, even before I was in a leadership position. You can't just come in, all right, now I'm the new principal, so this is the way we're going to do things. You have to build that trust with people, with the people that you're serving, and know that, hey, I'm on your team. I'm not the guy in the ivory tower. I'm on the front lines right with you. How can I help you? Type thing. And I don't know. I just really think people can tell if it's genuine or not. I think if I'm writing a note and I'm not genuine, that will shine through. But I really firmly believe in the little things, that if you're genuine in terms of, and I write about this in my book, using people's names is something that's very simple. But when you use people's names, call them by name, it makes them feel special. There is something about that. When you hear your name spoken, whether it's your wife speaking your name, or you're going to a conference and somebody you've seen on Twitter or you haven't seen in a year calls you by name and says, hey, Brian, when you hear the word Brian, is there something, there's something there that just, oh my gosh, she knows who I am. She knows who I am. Is that, and just the genuine appreciation for when you see something in a classroom. Doesn't have to be this huge drawn out lesson, but wow, hey, Mrs. Johnson, the way you went and just kind of reaffirmed that kiddo in the back who was having a hard time. That was so awesome. Because so often your teachers do these amazing things and they don't even realize they're doing it. It's part of what they do.
It's just ingrained in their work.
It's just ingrained in what they do. And I know so often when I'm doing observations and we debrief and we talk about things, I will bring stuff up and they're like, I didn't even know I was doing that. And I'm like, I know, because you're awesome. And it's just something
you do, because
exactly. But you need to hear that what you're doing, even subconsciously, is awesome. And here's the benefit of what that is, of what you're doing is making happen. You didn't see Billy, but the smile on his face, when you just gave him that little thumbs up, he's going home tonight and he's telling his mom about that thumbs up. Great job. Keep up and something like that, you never know what that teacher is going through. Or the student is going through. Mm-hmm. That may buoy them for a week. So,
yeah. And I think it's funny because when I went from working with, I had 15 kids, and sometimes I taught the same kids 2 years in a row. like 20 kids maybe tops. And then sometimes I taught the same kids 2 years in a row. So I knew every kid in the school's name.
Yeah.
Now, my first year I was working, with this new school district, I was teaching 300 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see them every day. And sometimes I wouldn't see them for 2-3 weeks because it was when their teachers would come in to work on projects that involved technology. I would build the technology into the curriculum with them and build the projects. And I remember it was like the beginning of my second year there, and maybe like 3 or 4 classes into working with this group of kids, I called the kid by his name, and he was like, "You know my name?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, "Yeah." I said, "I told you guys I told you this would be my first priority, would be to make sure I learn whatever you want me to call you. I will learn your name
Mm-hmm.
so that I can call you by name." Yeah. Because I said, and I will make sure that I pronounce your name correctly. And if I don't pronounce it correctly, you can throw stuff at me. I said, just soft stuff. I said, nothing hard. I don't want a concussion. But I said, if I can't get your name right, you tell me it's wrong until I get it right. And you can you can even embarrass me about it. You can make me feel dumb because it's my problem. I need to get it right, and I need to remember your names. So this kid was like, you know my name? I'm like, yeah. Granted, he was one of 3 kids with the same name in that class, so it made it really easy not to make that mistake. But he was just so amazed that, like, 2 weeks into school, somebody who only had seen him a couple times knew his name. I knew a lot of their names before they knew mine.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have 300, and they have like 7 teachers. So like, you could figure out your teachers' names hopefully within a few days. But
yeah.
A lot of times, and now they're flipping. Like I have kids that flip every marking period, and they're only in class with me for 20 days.
Yeah.
So I see them in the hallway. I'm like, "Hey, how's it going, so and so?" And they're like, "You remember me? You remember me?" I'm like, "I taught you 2 weeks ago. Just because I haven't seen you in a couple of days doesn't mean I don't know who you are." Yeah. And so one of the things I love about this time of the year, at this point of the year, I know so many of the kids just by name, by having spent time with them, and it makes such a big difference for them. Yeah. And it was one of the things that, like, when I went for my orientation at this building, and it was one of the things that impressed me so much, was that when we walked around the building, the principal knew there were 100 teachers there. So for 100 teachers, staff, plus like there's at least 120 people who work in this building, maybe more. We're walking around the building, and most of the people are there. He knew every single one of them by name. Yeah. First name, last name, something like he had something he could say to them about whatever. He knew everybody by their name. And I'm like, granted, he's supposed to. It's not technically something that's supposed to be that impressive, but it impressed me that we walked around a huge building. There were over 100 people that worked there, and he knew every single one of them by name.
It is impressive because I'm not good with names. It's something that I have to. Some people just boom. I'm great with faces. I'm great with locations. I could drive somewhere one time. 5 years later, get back there. But I have to work hard at whether it's mnemonics or trying to ingrain it in my head. So, but it's important and it's worth working hard. And I don't get it all. I don't get them right all the time. As I write about in my book, but it's worth it because, like you said, when those kids say, "You know who I am," and as an elementary principal, I have kids when I greet them and as they're walking up, I have literally heard students whisper in an awe-filled voice to a friend after I've called them by name.
"He knows my name.
He knows who I am."
And not in a bad way.
And not exactly. It's like, oh, he knows who I am. No.
Okay, if I know your name before the end of the first class, and I haven't forgotten, like I know you, okay, but if I know your name 4 days into school, like 4 or 5 days into school, I remember your name already, and it's not like an interesting or exotic name that's easy to like pull out of the crowd. That I feel like that takes some effort. You really have to
Yeah.
work, make sure you know who people are.
Yep.
And it's so important. It really is. So I like that a lot. So, you said you're right about this. You're right about, you've been talking about a couple of things that we can find in your book. Tell people why you decided to write a book. Like what was the motivation? Obviously all of us, hey, we all have these amazing stories. How did you end up putting them into a book?
Into a book form. Yeah. It's an interesting question because writing a book was kind of always a bucket list thing for me, but I thought it would be fiction. Like if I ever thought I would do it, there's still time. I did not think it would be a nonfiction educational text. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I was at an educational technology conference, the Q conference out in California. And I remember talking with a friend, Dennis Grice, in the hallway. I so vividly remember it. And the idea came to me for a session, for a conference session, was to tell stories. Because you just said it. We all have stories. Everybody has stories. You've probably heard it said. People say, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book with all the stories.
You can't. You're not allowed.
Well, not all those. You can't put every story in there. But I had that idea like 5, 6 years ago for a session, and it kind of just stuck with me because storytelling is such an effective teaching strategy. When I'm in church and my pastor in the middle of a sermon stops and says, like, let me tell you about the time when, or so last year, and he launches into a story, literally my ears perk up. I lean forward in my chair. I'm there. And because we remember stories. I mean, there's brain research that storytelling, hearing stories actually produces neurochemicals that increase focus and help us remember things. I mean, so it's like scientific. Stories aren't just fun to listen to. They actually help us remember things.
Yeah, but it allows you to connect with the information in a way that you couldn't before.
Exactly. And we remember things that we wouldn't remember when they're put in story form, we remember them. So I had this idea for a session, and I was able to kind of do it a couple times at real small conferences. And then this last year, I was honored. I had the opportunity to do a couple keynote presentations for some conferences, and I talked about what I call EduInfluence. It's kind of a term that I came up with to describe kind of the power that we as educators possess, regardless of our position, whether it's classroom teacher, site administrator, playground supervisor, librarian, cafeteria worker. It doesn't matter. If you work with kids, you possess these powers. And I had an opportunity to talk about this. And what I did was, for each one of these powers, for example, the power of a name, like we were talking about, rather than just saying, oh, you have this power, I tell stories from my experience that illustrate that power. So I did this. I got to do this keynote presentation. And at the second conference, I remember afterwards somebody coming up to me and saying, he said, you know what? Thank you. I really appreciated your talk. And he said, I want to let you know that one of the powers that I talk about is power of sharing, because I'm such a believer in the power of sharing. We all have what we have, people need. We need to be sharing that. And the gentleman came up and said, hey, I want to let you know that I recently lost 80 pounds. And I remember being like, wow, that's fantastic. And he said, and I tell you that because when you talked about the power of sharing, never before had I considered sharing how I did it, how I lost the 80 pounds.
He gave them to me. No.
but you're right. He said, you're right. I need to share it because somebody out there may be needing to lose some weight. And maybe the way I did it could help them do that. So it was at that point that I kind of said, you know what? I think I need to write this down. Like these stories that I'm sharing, I'm going to put this in a book. And I think about, what was it? Yeah, that was about it. It was, I was already toying with the idea. And when this gentleman came up and said, what you just shared has encouraged me to share myself, it hit me. You know what? If I write this into a book, I have the ability to share and get this message of encouragement and inspiration out to a lot more people than are just sitting in this conference right here. This couple hundred people who are right here. So, I mean, I'm not quitting my day job. I'm not going to get rich off of this, but I did it because I strongly believe in the message. And I think that the beautiful thing about education now with publishers like Sarah Thomas and EduMatch Publishing, people like you and me, who we can share our message, for lack of a better term, with hundreds, if not thousands of people out there who would not necessarily be able to get that.
Dozens and dozens of people.
Potentially, exactly. With my mom, my dad, my brother, my assistant principal, people who will feel sorry for me.
I know my mom has read the book at least once, so I got that going for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, potentially, it's out there.
I know she read the dedication page at least. So
the dedication, because she was in that part.
Oh yeah. That's what. And my wife was like, "It's like, why am I not in the dedication page?" I was like, "You're on the first line. You just skipped past it."
Okay.
I was like, "You're the first one." Like right there.
There you go. My wife is the first one on mine too.
Yeah. That's the safe bet right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really do. I love that. It's just that the importance of sharing, the importance of giving what you have to others, I think is really, really great. And so I want to kind of jump right back to the end before we wrap this up and you give everybody all the great information about your book. I just want to go back to something that I kind of didn't spend a lot of time on, and I would like to just maybe have you reload that for people, or maybe I can do it. It's just the idea of, it's just a quote that, as you were saying it, I kind of got a little bit of chills. I was just thinking to myself, that's such a great thought for people to realize, especially people who are trying to make change. You said you can't change a culture until you become a part of that culture, until you're part of it. And I think that's so, so valuable to think about it that way. Because it's like, I've been at the school I'm at now for 3 years, and it's taken a while for me to become a part of the school, and a part of what we do there, and who what the part of that culture and part of that building. There's still a lot of things I learn about that culture every day.
Yeah.
So for me to be able to really make any impact there and changes beyond the walls of my classroom, I need to be a part of it. I need to be a part of that culture. It's such a great message for both administrators and teachers who are trying to make a difference in their places where they work. So, I said, normally I ask for advice, but I think that's such good advice. Just really nailed it.
And for anyone listening, it takes time. You said you're there for 3 years. Yeah. I've been at mine for 6. This is my 6th, so I'm in the middle of my 6th year. And for some, it's going to be more quick than others. For some, you can build that trust very quickly. With others, it takes more time, and that's okay. We're all at different places. We're all but don't give. That would be my advice for anybody, for anyone listening is change.
Keep going.
Keep going. Keep going. And it's not. You can't. you're not going to build or change the culture in a microwave. Sometimes you gotta let it stew for a little bit.
If you put it in a microwave, it'll explode. I mean,
it's not to say that some things, if there's safety issues and stuff like that, okay, we're going to need to change that right away. But give it time, because it's worth it. It's you put that in the crock pot and let it go, let it simmer. You come into that kitchen, you smell that aroma of good culture. You come into that school, you smell that aroma that's been stewing in the crock pot for years and years.
That's not mold. That's good culture.
That's good culture. Exactly.
Awesome. So I love it. I really do. It takes time. It's something you got to be a part of, and really take the time to build trust with people and, get their names right.
Yep.
So, you shared a lot of good stuff with us tonight, shared a lot of good things about, yourself, where you've come from, where you've been, and also, your book, which you have coming out, Stories in EDU. So tell everybody how they can connect with you, how they can find out more about the book. It may be out before, I don't know the exact date, but I think it may be out before this podcast comes out. So because it's probably was it Monday?
It's actually, the paperback is actually out.
Oh, I saw the pre-release, but I didn't see the launch there. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll stand corrected. So tell everybody how they can get their own copy of the book, and also connect with you and find out more about Stories in EDU and other great things that you do at your campus.
Well, I'm going back to sharing. I love Twitter. I am on Twitter at Brent Coley. That's BrentColey. My website is brentcoley.com. And the book is, it's called Stories of EduInfluence. Again, EduInfluence is kind of the term that I coined, and each chapter is a different power. So the power of a name, power of relationships, power of belief, power of sharing, the power of apology, power of fun, the power of the little things like that. And every chapter, the whole book is just stories from my experiences, from humble successes to epic failures. They're not all rosy stories. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. Yeah, I did it. But I'm a firm believer that we learn from our mistakes, we learn from our successes. So
those are the most interesting ones. I mean,
yes,
everybody shares the nice little successes, but it's those ones that really define us, that ones that we have to pick up the pieces and come back and get better from, that I think make for a really powerful learning experience. So
I absolutely agree with that. And the book definitely has some of those in there. So you can get there, the webpage directly. You can go storiesofeduinfluence.com. Will take you to kind of my website page that talks about the book. And as I said, it's actually the Kindle version you can pre-order that. It releases on March 4th. 2019, but the paperback version is actually live. We jumped the release date because there's a conference coming up, and we had to make sure that some books were ready for that. But so if you go to Amazon and search Stories of EduInfluence, EDU influence, one word, or my name, Brent Coley, it'll come up. And if you pick up a copy and you listen to this, I would love to hear your thoughts. Hashtag EduInfluence. I encourage people to share your stories, your thoughts about the book, or if there's anything that resonates with you. Every chapter has reflection questions at the end. Again, the goal of the book is, as I said, is not to get rich. It's to encourage and inspire folks, and hopefully make you reflect, so that you can get better at what you do. Because like you said, that's how our mistakes, we're constantly refining, we're constantly getting better. And that's the goal for the book. So
awesome. So Stories of EduInfluence, go buy it now. And then while you're waiting for it to ship on Amazon, you can listen to Brent's podcast, which is Teaching Tales. There's a great episode
with you.
Everybody basically but me is an amazing episode.
No, yours is a good episode.
Yeah, there's some really great content on there. There's some great episodes, especially over the past couple of months. I've caught up on a bunch of them, from like from mine through the summer, and there's just some really great episodes. You mentioned Toby, and there's a great episode with Mandy Froelich and a few others that are they're fantastic. So check out the podcast while you're waiting for your book to come in the mail. So Brent, thanks for sharing everything with me. Good luck with the official release of the book, and the rest of the school year.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Brian, for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Same here. All right. Thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time on The Teacher's Journey.